Thank you.
Well, Sir Richard, I have to say, it is exciting to be up here with you today.
It's exciting to be out here with you.
You know, I became the CEO of TaskRabbit a year and a half ago, in April of last year, and a friend of mine said, you should write down a list of the people that you want to meet. You know, people that you think would be helpful to your new job and what you're doing. So on that very short list was Sir Richard Branson. And I sent her that email and I said, do you know him? She said, no, I don't. I said, do you know anybody who knows him? She said, no, I don't. And I said, well, maybe I'll get to meet him someday. So today is that day. And I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you. When we might look like we're sort of compatible, but she wrote a no, we don't know. We do look like we're compatible. She wrote a book about mathematics when she was at school. I mean, it's absolutely the last thing I would have been able to do. So I don't know. This is going to be a very interesting conversation.
Indeed. Well, mostly I'm going to pretend the rest of the people aren't here and have that meeting that I've always wanted to have with you. Is that okay?
Yeah, actually, it's funny about that because when I was very young, I was an incredibly nervous speech maker, and somebody said to me, just pretend you're having a chat on stage with a friend. And don't think that there's anybody out there. So, yeah, there's nobody out there.
Yeah,
let's have a chat.
Yeah. Let's just do it. Let's start with the hurricanes. Necker Island is your home. It's your place of peace, your place of refuge, where you go, where you entertain, where you have fun, where you live life, where you think. And there was massive destruction. And you decided to stay there and endure it. Why did you make that decision?
Well, there were going to be, some of our staff had to stay there. I've been through, every 10 years there's a hurricane in the Caribbean on average. And the previous 3 hurricanes were, to be honest, magnificent. I mean, like the sky, the sea, the beauty of the hurricane is something to behold. And yes, it causes damage, but like a Category 1 or Category 2 hurricane, you can withstand it. On this occasion, it was effectively a Category 7 hurricane, so the biggest, the strongest hurricane in history, winds over 200 miles an hour. And we all went down into the bunker room, and we huddled together, and it was a concrete room, but still you could hear it, absolutely screaming around us for about 5.5 hours. And after 5.5 hours, there was just this deathly hush, and we thought either it's passed or we're in the eye of the hurricane. And we opened the door very slowly and looked out over the island at utter devastation. It was like a nuclear bomb had hit the island. And then the other side of the eye hit us, and we threw ourselves back in for another 6-hour ride. The whole of the British Virgin Islands were completely devastated. I mean, like, I don't think there was any houses that were untouched, and most, about 85% were unlivable in afterwards. We can afford to cope with it. But what I've been spending, yesterday I was in Washington meeting the World Bank and meeting the International Development Bank and the Green Fund and trying to get a coalition of people together to try to sort of rebuild the Caribbean and make sure that something positive comes from it. So if we can, one of the things that survived on Necker was solar panels, and we had electricity in 24 hours, whereas the main city is likely to be about 9 months off the grid. So anyway, we'll get something positive to come from it.
Yeah, I think your son Sam has also put together a video or documentary about it. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, he went into the community. He's grown up in the British Virgin Islands. He's very close to everybody there, and just wanted to. He made a lovely sort of 15-minute documentary on I mean, lovely, all the destruction and but the resilience, basically, of the incredible Caribbean people. They still smile, even the day after, when they've been through, absolute terror, but they're still smiling.
Yeah, I think we have some footage of it that we can show here today.
On September the 6th, a Category 5 hurricane unleashed its ferocious power on the Caribbean. It pounded the British Virgin Islands with unprecedented force. Irma has left behind a trail of unimaginable destruction. The islands and its people are shocked to the core and in a desperate state of emergency. People have lost everything. Homes and livelihoods have been obliterated overnight. There is a momentous task ahead. Food, water, and shelter are desperately needed. The people of the Virgin Islands need your help. Please give what you can. Every donation counts.
The events around the world like this are horrible at the moment. We were going to do a Virgin Sports event here in San Francisco today, which is one of my reasons for coming here today. And the mayor suggested that we should cancel it because, obviously all the firefighters, all the policemen are very, very occupied. And what's happening in Sonoma and Napa, and they say that the winds knocked down the electricity cables and started fires. Who's to know what the cause was? But but I'm afraid that the scientists have warned us that these events are going to become more and more going to recur more and more often, and the storms are going to get stronger and stronger. So, sensible-minded countries are doing something about it. Sensible-minded states are doing something about it. And that's I finished my statement.
Thank you for that. We have a TaskRabbit team that just actually came back from Houston, where we're working on some of the recovery efforts there. So I like to think that sensible-minded companies are also trying to do something about it.
I think one of when governments are not acting in the interests of their citizens, in the past, companies did not stand up and were not there to be accounted for. I mean, the exciting thing today is that business leaders are saying, damn it, we're not just here for the next quarterly results and to satisfy our shareholders. We are here as citizens of our countries, and we're here to speak out on issues. If people are changing laws against the minority groups like the gay community or the minority, other minority groups, we will speak out about it. And it's great to see small companies, big companies, mid-sized companies now speaking out on issues, and we need it more than ever.
Yeah. I've read the book, and it's an amazing collection of stories. Some that I shared with you backstage that I believe can't possibly be true, but suppose they are, and I'm going to hold that, and hopefully you all do too. But it felt like this is a book about starting again and overcoming challenges, and really a call to action. Is that how you thought about writing the second autobiography?
Yeah, I mean, I did my first autobiography about 20 years ago, losing my virginity, and that was about the struggling years. It did have a chapter about losing my virginity, but if you're very good, I'll tell that story.
That's the title, so that's good.
And so that was the struggling years, and we started with without any financial backing, and a lot of adventures, the ballooning and the boating, and all, trying to kill myself in lots of different ways, and the last 20 years, I mean, I love learning, I love finding out about new things, and I've been extraordinarily lucky, the amount of challenges that I've had over the last 20 years, and I thought they were worth sharing with people, and actually I think everybody should write a book. I mean, it's everyone's got a story to tell. We've all got, well, not all of us, but a lot of us have children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and I think it's a wonderful thing to be able to do, to write a book, to share your life with other people. You're going to have lessons. Everybody, I mean, my mum from, when she was, she was just an ordinary housewife, but she had wonderful lessons that she brought us up by. If I ever said ill about anybody, she would put me in front of the mirror and tell me I had to stand there for 10 minutes because to indicate how badly it reflected on me, the fact that I'd actually said a bad word about someone. And there were lots of wonderful lessons that I got from her, my dad. I remember stealing. Myself and my sister went into his bedroom, and he left his loose change from his pockets in a top drawer, and we took some money out, and we went to the next door shop, which happened to be a sweet shop, very tempting, and we bought this enormous pile of sweets, and we thought, our eyes were getting bigger and bigger, and then Mrs. Avenel picked up the old phone and rang my dad, and he came around, and she said to him, Mr. Branson, I was about 6, and my sister was about 3.5, and she said, I think your children have been stealing from you. And my father looked at her straight in the eyes and said, Mrs. Avenel, how dare you accuse my children of stealing? And then very pointedly he left the sweets on the counter and took us each by our hand and took us home, and never said anything again about it, and we never stole from him again in our lives. But anyway, all these little stories, every family have them, and I think everybody should try writing a book if they can.
Yeah, moms and dads are really important. My mom's here tonight, a great source of strength.
Where is she?
And
Hey, Mum.
She's right there.
Yeah.
There's over 40 chapters in the book, and you dedicate a chapter in the book it's called Dad. And you talk about your dad, and that's my favorite chapter. I just have to say, it's my favorite chapter in the book. There's a lot of stories in there about what you learned from him over time. And do you have any more stories to share about some learnings from Dad?
Well, his favorite words were "Isn't life wonderful?" And so my notebook has on the front, "Isn't life wonderful?" I went on a safari with him when he was 87 years old, and we followed the migration through Tanzania and Kenya with another 87-year-old and one of my closest friends, and it was pouring with rain. We were tenting at night times. There was a hole dug in a sort of little, every night for him, poor man, who had to get up 2 or 3 times during the night in the pouring rain to go and squat over a hole. And after about a week of it, he turned to me one morning and said, one evening and said, don't you have a rather beautiful game reserve somewhere in Africa? and I thought he'd been very polite for a week. Anyway, that night he goes to sleep, and we were sleeping in the same tent. He wakes up the next morning with the biggest grin on his face. This isn't in the book, actually, this story. With the biggest grin on the face ever. And I said, Dad, did you have a nice dream? And he said, yes. I said, did it involve a woman? And he said, yes. I said, did you misbehave with her? And he said, no, but she misbehaved with me outrageously.
Very good, very good.
Anyway, he had a wonderful sense of humor, and I think humor's important.
Humor is indeed important.
Yeah, and we've been lucky as a family. I mean, my mum and dad were very close. I've been with my lady for 40 years, and I was doing a talk in England, and what was the words I used? She called her a sexy something, and she was very chuffed. She's 6 years older than me now, we've obviously got 2 lovely children, 4 beautiful grandchildren, all aged 2. So yeah, it's really helped. Having that stability has helped make everything else, I think, possible. And I've always worked from home, so I've always had the kids sort of running around while I'm seeing people. And we used to be a houseboat, and then now it's an island. But anyway,
there you go.
Or now it was an island. And I think it's taught me that the importance. I talk about it in the book. The importance of, so a lot of American companies, I think, still do not give enough flexibility with the people who come and work for them. I think that that home life and work life, how you feel at home and how you feel at work ought to be almost one and the same thing. So, so if at home you believe in the environment, when you go to work, people at work should be thinking about the environment and treasuring it, and friendships should be as important at work as at home. If people want to go off for 2 months holiday, the company shouldn't question that. They should just say, that's great, we'll pay you, go off, have some time off.
Let's talk about that a little bit.
People.
Yeah, everybody wants to work for you now. Everybody in the building, 1,000 people.
But I think I think people, just treating people as adults. I mean, if people want a job share, they should job share. If you want to work from home Fridays and Mondays, they should, and so on. And so, it's just treating people in an adult way. I mean, this idea of 2 weeks holiday a year or 3-week holiday a year, that American companies seem to impose on their people is just not it's not a proper life, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting that, what you're getting into is the culture of the companies that you've built, the brand that you've built. I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. That was around the time you were not stealing or stealing, maybe, at 6 and 3. 2 little girls.
Watch them now.
Yeah, exactly.
Have Granny watch them.
She's G-Mama, and she has to watch them. But my 6-year-old, when we fly Virgin America, she calls it the purple plane. And she said, when are we going to fly the purple plane? And it's because the lights on the inside are purple. And so you've done something really special in building the brand. You've done something special in creating the culture. I think we've got some pictures that we can show in the background of what the culture looks like. But how have you sustained that across all of the brands, all of the companies that you've built?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, when we launched Virgin Atlantic, 35 years ago, we had one second-hand 747. It was, and I remember as the plane took off, just looking around and thinking, we have the most delightful staff in the whole wide world, that everyone's smiling, everyone's happy. All our guests have got the biggest smile on their face. If I would sort of close my eyes and turn the clock forward 30 years, would that still be the case? And incredibly, it is still the case. And that's the real challenge. It's easy, when you've got one plane, but now we've got 3 airlines around the world and thousands of staff. Can you keep it? Can you keep that up? And I think you can if you if you make sure that you give your people, you genuinely look after your people, that you praise, you don't criticize, you inspire them, you give them the tools to do a great job. So, you mentioned Virgin America. It's won the best airline award 12 years out of the last 12 with Condé Nast Traveler. And every single little detail is right. So with a lot of airlines, these details are forgotten about, and therefore very quickly, the macrobiotic food has not been put on board. I'm very sorry, sir. They didn't put it on today. The vegetarian meal. Oh, I'm afraid we've run out of vegetarian meals. The seat. Oh, that seat's been broken for a week. It was broken the last time I was on the plane, etc., etc., etc. The norm for most airlines, and what that means is that the airline boss most likely doesn't fly his own airline. If he does fly his own, or he or she does fly the own airline, they're not out there talking to the customers, talking to the staff, writing notes, getting all the little details sorted, making sure that every single little thing is right. You've got to run a company, companies like you'd run a private restaurant where you're the chef there. You're worrying about every single little detail. You've got to think like that. Even if you've got 300 companies, you've got to find managing directors, who think like that, who genuinely care, who worry about the details, who give the staff the tools to do a great job.
Right.
How many people out there would like to go to space? All right, I think there's my answer.
But there've been a lot of setbacks.
You either want to go to space, which actually the vast majority of people would absolutely love to, or you absolutely don't want to go to space. My wife is in the category of, I absolutely don't want to go to space. My kids are in the category of, we're going. We'd absolutely love to go. Because, I think most of us want to test ourselves, but most of us would just, I think, love the experience of going from, well, a lot of us would love the experience of going from 0 to 3,500 miles an hour in 8 seconds. Think of that as a rush going into space, and then that wonderful silence as you get into space, and unbuckling your belt, and we've got big windows, and you can float around and just look back at this beautiful Earth we live on, and people who've been to space, and there's only 480 of them in the history of space travel, they come back changed, and they come back really wanting to do more to protect this lovely Earth of ours. So I think that Virgin Galactic can enable thousands of people over the next decades to go to space and have that experience. Through those people going to space, that will enable us to do wonderful other things as well, in space. So, already in March of next year, we're going to be putting up an orbital rocket called Virgin Orbital, which will go 18,000 miles an hour around the Earth, and that will be dropping satellites off and we'll have an array of 2,000 satellites with a company called OneWeb which I talk about in the book that we're involved in, and they can connect the 4 or 5 billion people who are not connected, and if you're not connected, you can't start businesses really. You can't get a proper education and so on. So that's exciting. Point-to-point travel, that's another thing. I mean, our spaceships are shaped like aeroplanes. To make them bigger is relatively easy. Our rivals' spaceships are big rockets, and so we're the only company who are building spaceships shaped like spaceships, and who that can land on their wheels and come back down again. And that means that point-to-point travel, I think, should not be very far away. Anyway, it's exciting. You only live once.
I was squinting to see if my husband raised his hand because he wasn't sure earlier today if he wanted to go to space, and I want to go to space. So one of us just
did he raise it?
Going. I didn't tell. Did you raise your hand?
Let's have a look. Where is he? Stand up.
Right there.
He's raised his hand.
He's raised his hand. Good.
Yeah,
so now we both want to go. Thank you for convincing him, Sir Richard, to go to space. Appreciate it. Because I didn't really want to go by myself.
Tell me something. Are you sad that the company's got sold?
That's a good question. No. Because this is weird. Like the interviewee is asking the interviewer a question.
Yeah.
No, because my vision is to bring TaskRabbit everywhere. IKEA has 340-something stores worldwide, and we get to take our services into every store in the world.
Right. Now give me an honest answer.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So that makes me really happy.
I mean, when Virgin America got sold, I was really sad, and I write about it in the book. And one of the problems was that because I got an English voice, I try putting on an American accent, but I'm not very good at it. The Department of Transportation said, okay, well, you can set up an airline in America, but you can't have voting shares. So when Alaska made an offer that the shareholders couldn't refuse, sadly, it went. But and somehow the sad thing sometimes about selling companies, it's like selling your family. If you're a close company, it can be a sad day anyway.
Yeah, and I read that part, and I mostly want the color of the planes to stay purple for my 6-year-old, and I know you don't have.
I haven't got much influence anymore, but
anymore.
Actually, no. Do you know? I think they're even changing that. I mean, it's strange. It's strange when people buy companies and they buy them because they're so good, and then they start making changes. It's just anyway strange.
I think there's some people in the audience who are also sad, but yeah, it's a great feeling to have the opportunity. But the family of TaskRabbit has grown.
I mean, going back to space, I mean, obviously, space is hard, as was mentioned in the opening film, and we've had tears and we've had calamity over the last 12 years since we started embarking on this, and obviously the crash of 4 years ago was a massive blow, and I suppose the book spends quite a lot of time on dealing with that, and when you have an accident like that, you have to ask the question, do you carry on or do you not carry on?
Yeah.
And those 24 hours were a tough 24 hours. I went to Mojave Desert, and I think if you have something like that happens, and the buck must stop with the person who owns the company, you get to the scene of the accident quickly, and we had 600 engineers working there. Fortunately, very quickly, we found out it wasn't a technical problem, and so I was able to tell them all that that they'd built a wonderful spaceship. It wasn't their fault. We had the biggest hug in history. I mean, we had 600 or 700 of us. Some people are religious, some people are not religious. You've got all sorts of different people, and I think a hug, everybody can have a hug. And a few tears. In fact, I'm sure quite a lot of tears. And then, we asked the 700 people who'd signed up to go to space, and hardly anybody dropped out. Less than a handful. And then the next day we decided we'll keep going. You've got these very brave test pilots, in lots of different, testing all sorts of different craft around America and around the world. And they're there to try to find out, what could go wrong later on when there's members of the public on board, and they stick their necks out. And there are some things you actually can't work out except in a test flight. I mean, on the ground, on paper, you're a mathematician, but anyway, you can pretty well work it all out. But there are some things, you just have to go and test things in flight. And so those were sort of some of the ups and downs, so you've got to have some downs, otherwise a book's a book's, if it's all a success story, it's not such a great read.
But the downs are the things that you've used as ways to overcome. So we're going to open up for questions in about 5 minutes, so get ready for your questions. There'll be people walking around for you to ask questions, but I'm going to ask Sir Richard one more, maybe 2 more questions before we go to Q&A. Your ups and downs and your life extremes are definitely things that people have read about, heard about, watched on TV. And so I don't want to ask a question about that. I was going to, but what I want to ask about are the elders. You talked about your family as a source of support. How did the group of elders come together? Why did you decide to do that? How did you assemble that group? What is that group doing today, and what kind of support network is that for you?
Some years ago, I met Saddam Hussein at an airport in Iraq. We'd managed to persuade him to release some hostages he held, in exchange for us bringing some medical supplies for his people. And we arrived in a 747 in a black, in Baghdad airport. Nobody had been there for 2 years. And we got off the plane. He brought the hostages to the plane. And it was, it was a strange night. I mean, a fascinating night. I mean, the last plane that had been there was a British Airways plane that had been blown up by Saddam Hussein. So we couldn't be absolutely certain that we weren't going to be held as hostages ourselves. But anyway, he stuck by his word. He handed over the hostages. We flew back to England. And then when George Bush Jr. decided to invade Iraq, I felt it was going to be a ghastly mistake. I'd been through the Vietnamese War many years before, which was one of the reasons I left school to launch a magazine to campaign against it. Another very unjust war. And so I contacted Nelson Mandela, who'd spoken out against the idea of invading Iraq again, and said, that I'd had a communication with Saddam Hussein, and that he would be willing to see Nelson Mandela. And I thought that if Nelson Mandela went to see him, that he might be able to persuade him to step down to avoid a war. And Mandela said he would go if Kofi Annan, who was then Secretary General of the United Nations, would go with him. Kofi Annan agreed to go with him. And then, sadly, the day they were due to leave, the bombing started, and the meeting never took place. And what we'd been hoping was that we could have persuaded Saddam Hussein to go and live in somewhere like Libya, and then spare the need for a war. Anyway, it got me thinking that, maybe, and a friend of mine who was one of the artists on Virgin also had a similar idea, Peter Gabriel. It got us both thinking, maybe the world needed a group of elders, just like an African village has a group of elders that young people could look up to, who could speak out on global issues, and who could go into conflicts and try to resolve conflicts. And so Mandela agreed to be the founding elder with his wife Graça Machel. He appointed 6 of the most respectable men and women in the world, most reputable men and women in the world, who were in the last 15 years of their life, who put ego behind them, who put politics behind them. So people like President Carter from America, Archbishop Tutu, Mary Robinson, Kofi Annan, and others. Wonderful group of people. And Ban Ki-moon's just joined, and so on. And they've done incredible things over the last 10 years. They've stopped conflicts in places like Kenya and other places. They've started Girls Not Brides, a wonderful organization to try to persuade countries to stop marrying off kids of very young age, and so on. Today they spoke out very strongly against Trump's move with Iran. They were almost tearful about what damage that's going to do. There was an agreement which almost guaranteed that we would not get a nuclear Iran. The decision that was made today could easily turn Iran into into a nuclear state. And just after all the hard work that the international community went in, this what came out of the White House was really, really, really worrying. So they're brave, and they'll go to countries, they'll go and see Putin, and they'll go and go to his Dachau and talk to him. They'll go to North Korea. They'll go to Iran. They'll go to countries that other people won't go to, and they'll get in there and try to resolve conflicts.
That's great. Thank you for putting that group together. And we've all been touched by Nelson Mandela at some point in our lives in some way, and it's remarkable what the impact he's had on you. I know we want to open up to questions. Are we going to cut lights on, or are we gonna? How are we gonna? I tell
one story in the book when Madiba, which as he's affectionately called in Africa, died. I was invited by Graça to his funeral, and I was. They just lowered the coffin, and then one of Madiba's grandsons fell into the hole, and I looked, and a few moments later they pulled him out, and then another one of the grandsons fell into the hole, and I looked around me, and people didn't seem to be that surprised, and I just couldn't work out what was going on. Anyway, it turned out that I was being a bit stupid. There's a tradition that you go down and you place something on top of the coffin, some element of friendship that you've had with the person. But anyway, I just for a few moments thought this is all going horribly wrong. I'm dyslexic, which is obviously a lot less of an issue than what your own child is going through, and we spend a lot of time trying to help, encourage, and work with dyslexics, and 3 days ago we walked up 4 days ago walked up the highest mountain in North Africa, and we spent 18 hours talking about dyslexia and first of all is it right that something called like dyslexia should have a name called dyslexia? Is it demeaning to people who are dyslexic? Could we come up with a more positive name? And what can we do to be more helpful to kids who are dyslexic? And I think we have on our island, we get together groups of people to look at a whole lots of different issues like this, and brainstorm, and then just try to try our best to see if we can help overcome some of these problems. We have a group called the Audacious Ideas, which I talk about in the book, which just pulling together some of the most successful people in the world and just saying, right, let's brainstorm, 8 projects that we can all work together to try to, solve the problems in the coming year, and use our resources to do so. It could be that with what the work you're trying to do, you could maybe submit an idea for an audacious idea session, and we work with Chris from TED Talks. They pull the submissions together, and then we choose which to do. Sorry, I wasn't very eloquent on that one, but anyway, I wish you all the best. Thank you.
So we've got time for one, maybe 2 more questions, and then I get the last question.
Okay, so we have a question up on the balcony.
Okay.
So Richard, hello. Firstly, thank you for the employment. I was your DJ at the Virgin Megastore here in San Francisco for 3 years, in 1997 to 2000. My name's Liam. Thank you, Sir Richard, and the checks did clear. But my question, if you could have the ear of the current occupier of the White House, what would be the 3 things on your agenda? Wow. And second part of the question, on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy was Barack Obama the day he spent time with you after leaving office?
Okay. That might be our 2 questions. Go for it.
Well, dealing with the second part first. Yeah, I mean, we were, he came the day after Trump took over the White House. They had 10 wonderful days, I think, in the Caribbean, just letting the hair down and trying not to look back at what was going on in the White House. And he hadn't surfed for 8 years, and we had a kite surfing competition together, and which he won, and incredibly fit, absolutely delightful, and when you spend time with him, he is, he's everything that I think most of us, I suspect, in this room think of him and more, and his delightful wife is the same. So. And they did. They were a wonderful example to the world. I think all of us around the world felt that we could look up to America and their leadership for those 8 years. My thoughts on Trump, you're going to have to read the book. I have a whole chapter, a chapter on him, and I've had some strange experiences, but the world is now having some strange experiences. So, and I chose to speak out about it before the election, and I think it's important that people who've met him personally do speak out about the experiences they have, and people need to know his good points and his faults.
So we are almost at the end of time. I get to ask the last question. It's a standard last question for Commonwealth Club events. The last chapter in your book is called Grand Dude. and it's about you being a grandfather. And in fact, after the end, you write a letter to Bluey while he's sleeping in Necker Island, and it's about your wishes for the world. And so the standard question we have here is, what's your 60-second idea for changing the world?
Look, I think the great. No, I can't do it in 60 seconds. I'm dyslexic, all right? I mean, anyway. No, I think. Look, I think if you watch the news today, you'll think that the world is in a very sad place, and actually, in my lifetime, every single metric, the world has improved. My father fought in Europe. My grandfather fought in Europe. My great-grandfather fought in Europe. Wars, by and large, should be a thing of the past, and by and large are a thing of the past. The wars that have been started in my lifetime have generally been started by America, and they were unnecessary wars. The Vietnamese War was a ghastly mistake. America and Britain to a large extent. The Iraq War was a ghastly mistake. I mean, it spawned ISIS, the Syria situation, everything can flow from it. It was completely unwarranted and was proven to be completely unwarranted. So we've just got to, we've got to make sure that there are no more wars. And I'd spent my 60 seconds up. I've got lots more to say, but no more wars anyway.
Well, I know we've all got more to ask and you have more to say, but we have to end. So let's give Sir Richard Branson a round of applause for being here tonight at the Commonwealth Club.